Oh, hi. Welcome to Aquata Zoo, where we like to nerd out over all things zoo and aquarium related. I'm l.semple, and today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about perception in zoos and aquariums. I know we talked about perception in the workplace last week, but I figured we'd talk about it as it pertains to our organizations as far as zoos and aquariums go as well. To be fair, perception is important in basically all businesses because, it's all about your brand, about your reputation. And if you have bad things happen as a result of perception of your practices or things that your employees have done or said, bad things happen for your organization. So it's good to be aware, whether you're at a zoo or aquarium or any other type of business, it's very good to understand how your organization is being perceived. I think one of the easiest illustrations of this is if you have a uniform, right? And a lot of zoos and aquariums have these. If you have a uniform and you decide to go shopping after work or whatever, right? You're going to go grab some groceries. That's all fine and good. Do your thing. A lot of places prohibit shopping in uniform because you could go buy, say, a bottle of wine while you're out getting your groceries. That's not against the law. It's totally fine. However, there's a possibility that another shopper or an employee at that store or something could see you in uniform with your bottle of wine and assume that you're drinking on the job. That's not the case, of course. And they probably wouldn't think that, but it's always a possibility that they could think that. They could get a complaint from a citizen, a random customer, somebody who saw someone out and about with their bottle of wine in a work shirt that says the organization's name on it and lets them know that so-and-so is walking around with a bottle of wine while wearing their work shirt. They could be drunk on the job. It seems far-fetched. However, it's a non-zero chance of that sort of thing happening. So a lot of employers will say, hey, change your clothes out of your uniform if you're going to go shopping for alcohol specifically. Or, that sort of thing. Things that fall into that same vein, right? Because they want to avoid the perception that the workers are drinking on the job and that they're going to provide drunken service or whatever. I know this seems silly, but they have to manage that perception because it's not what the business is about. It's not what the organization does. They're not employing a bunch of drunks, hopefully, and they don't want the organization associated with people who are drinking excessively. Now, having a bottle of wine in your hand is not the same as drinking, is not the same as being a drunk, but they just want their brand separated from that kind of thing, right? So they may ask, please do not shop for alcohol while you're wearing your work uniform because we're trying to manage the perception here. I'm sure you've seen on social media, cancel culture is kind of about this, right? The perception of, someone doing their day-to-day job or in their work uniform, doing something unsavory, right? Doing something that the organization that is their employer does not agree with, right? And so people will go to their employer if they're caught on camera or they're on social media doing something crazy or unexpected or harassing someone or something like that. They'll go back to that organization and say, is this the kind of people you employ? Well, now they're put in a weird position, right? That organization just had this person who is their employee, who is, maybe spouting some terrible thing about another person or getting physical with someone, doing something that the organization itself does not agree with, right? Well, now they have to get rid of that person or there has to be corrective action or something like that. There's a lot of perception management, especially tied to social media. And so a lot of the time they'll not want you in uniform while you're out and about doing your daily thing. If you do get tied back to the organization, the repercussions of that can be pretty swift and pretty harsh because they don't want to be affiliated with somebody who is doing XYZ non-agreeable thing that does not align with their values. So they might cut you loose. They might press charges. They might do, any number of things. There's going to be repercussions for all the decisions that we make. Of course, we're adults. That's what happens. But organizations strive very heavily to not be tied to perceptions that they don't like, that don't agree with what they're actually trying to do. This gets really hard for zoos and aquariums because there's a lot of chances that an animal can be photographed in a not so flattering light, or that a practice can be questioned because the people who are watching don't understand what's happening. I've shared this before, but it fits here. I had a director at one point for the organization that I worked in go take a photo of some turtles, right? These turtles were very energetic, they were very personable, and so when they saw people, they get really excited and they'd swim on over or walk on over and like kind of climb on top of each other trying to see you, whoever was at the side of their little enclosure. And they try to see you and try to see what you're doing or try to see if you have a snack. You know, they're just piling on top of each other, pushing each other out of the way. And it was kind of cute. She took a photo of, I think there were 3 or 4 of these turtles that were kind of piled on top of each other. Adorable picture. I knew it was happening in the photo. I did not think twice about it. But when she posted that photo on social media and said, "Oh, look at these turtles, aren't they cute?" people went nuts. Because all they saw was a close cropped photo of turtles piled on top of each other, and then they assumed that those animals did not have enough room for the enclosure that they were in. And that was not the case. They had tons and tons of room. It just happened to be that when they saw people, they would get excited and they would start moving and they would like pile on top of each other to see, to get a better vantage point of what you're doing and who you were and if you had food, right? I'm sure people have seen animals do this. Like pets do this, dogs, cats, they're just happy to see you, or they want to see if you have a snack, right? So they're just kind of all in each other's business trying to get to you because they want to see what you're up to. And so these turtles did the exact same thing. It was not a problem. They had plenty of room. They just happened to pile on top of each other because the person was standing right there and they wanted to see what that person was up to, right? But the perception then was that we were cruel. We did not give enough room to these animals and they were forced into this position where they were piled on top of each other. Did anybody have reason to make that assumption? No, but we had to manage it. Because we were not being cruel to these animals. In fact, they had a very spacious enclosure where they could do whatever they wanted, sit under the light, bask, swim, they could do all kinds of stuff, and they were quite happy and healthy where they were. But we had to kind of address that and show every square inch of this exhibit that they were in, just so that people could understand that you jumped to quick judgment by the photo and you came to the wrong conclusion about what we're up to here, but we had to manage that perception. It didn't matter what we were doing. In that moment, it mattered more what people were thinking about what we were doing. Because if people don't think you are providing a good home or providing good care for an animal as a zoo or aquarium, like, that's a kiss of death. If they think you're providing poor care for any of the animals in your collection, that is a problem. And it should be a problem anyway, but if they just perceive that, it's a problem. What initially brought this whole perception thing up was a talk that I heard from a company who does professional animal collection for zoos and aquariums, and they were doing their job and were caught on camera, and people got very upset about it, right? And they had done everything correctly. You know, they were working with their local authorities. They had permission to do what they were doing. They had the permits filed, but the video just made it look crazier than it actually was, right? And it was upsetting for people who saw it, even though they were being kind, they were doing the right thing, and they were authorized to do what they were doing. But it didn't matter, right? When the video got out and people were kind of reacting to it, they had a lot of problems, and it caused a lot of litigation because people were very upset, and they did everything right, and they struggled with that because they prided themselves on doing everything legally and correctly and with permission and with everyone involved's knowledge of what was happening, right? And in the end, the animal that they caught in the video was going to be part of a breeding program so that in the future, less animals would be taken from the wild. But the issue was that the people who saw that video did not know the whole backstory, and they did not know the intent, and they did not know that this was being done legally. And so this poor company had to kind of deal with that and just take the brunt of the punishment for the act being caught on camera and them being very unpopular as a result of it. They struggled with the fact that they had done everything right? They had done the paperwork, they had the authorization, the knowledge of all parties who needed to know. Everyone knew what they were doing when they were doing it. However, it didn't matter because the perception was so bad. When they were caught on camera doing their work, normally they were doing fine. Everything from my standpoint looked normal, but for people who don't know what's going on when they see it and or did not know what the intent was behind it all, which was to establish a breeding program for this animal, it did not go over well, and it didn't matter because they were in a heap of trouble even though they had done everything right. That's what I'm talking about here. So I'll have people come in and see a sea turtle that's sleeping on the bottom of a tank and think that I'm being cruel by just enclosing them in there and not having fun things for them to play with. So now all they can do is sleep, right? First, they usually think they're dead, but believe it or not, sea turtles do take lots of naps, and they just lay on the bottom of the tank if they can do that. And that's where they spend a lot of their day. And it's not because they're unhappy. It's not because we're taking poor care of them. It's just because that's what they normally do. You just normally don't see that, right? You don't normally get to see the sea turtles taking a nap. So now they're seeing it, and now they're concerned that I'm not providing good enough care for this animal because look at him, he's just moping, you know? It looks so sad. And I have to deal with that, right? Because it does look sad. It's just sleeping. I don't look particularly thrilled, I don't think, when I'm sleeping. But people, A, don't realize that turtles sleep, and B, don't realize that they look a little mopey when they do it. They just kind of stick their head in a corner or something and just lay there. You know, it's nothing fancy. It's nothing alarming. I'm used to seeing it all the time. But perception is when a person comes by, they don't know anything about sea turtles. They don't know what they should be doing. They see this animal laying on the bottom of the corner, or in the corner on the bottom of the tank, and they just write in a story for themselves. They assume that we're not providing good care to that animal, and now it's depressed or dead. And so it is then my job to kind of manage that. And so I might put stuff in the tank so that just people feel more comfortable viewing the animals with their enrichment items or with other animals when there is something else that they can look at besides the turtle who's taking a nap, as they normally do. You just don't usually see it. You know, put some other animals in there to spruce things up so that people think that, well, they're at least taking care of these rays okay. They must be taking care of this turtle okay, you know? That's also why we work really hard to avoid stereotypical behaviors. So animals that are pacing and doing repetitive movements, people understand that looks weird and that animals don't normally do that in the wild for the most part. You know, there's some animals that maybe kind of would, like they're scoping out their territory. You know, if they're particularly territorial animals, they might just be pacing around the edge of their territory to make sure everything's cool and nobody's invaded, you know. That might be part of their natural behavior. The guests may not know that, right? There's also the possibility that an animal is pacing because it's anticipating going into its barn or its night house for a snack. And they just like that. And so they're just kind of, you know, pacing back and forth because they're just waiting for those doors to open. Or maybe they hear the keeper's keys. They know that sound. That means this door is about to open, so I'm going to start pacing. They might pace for 2 minutes while this is going on. But if a guest walks by and that's all they see, then they have all the right to write the rest of the story and say, oh my goodness, they don't take care of this animal. Look at it pacing over there. It was pacing the entire time that I was looking at it, which is true. But they were only looking at it for those 2 minutes right before it went off exhibit to get its snacks because it was excited for its snacks, you know? But it doesn't matter because that snapshot of what was happening at that time was a stereotypical behavior, which is not normal. And it's usually why we kind of avoid those types of behaviors where we can. Like, it's going to happen sometimes, but we try to minimize them as much as we can. Well, A, because the animal shouldn't be doing that, and B, we don't want to manage the perception of what that looks like. I know of another facility that is keeping a type of animal indoors, and it hasn't been a problem for most of the time that this facility has been open to the public. However, recently, somebody just kind of realized that these animals basically never see natural sunlight, and that seemed like an entirely foreign concept and was unacceptable. And I understand that sentiment, but a lot of this type of animal are kept indoors. It's kind of standard practice just because of the conditions they need to be in. It's easier to control the parameters of everything in an indoor setting than it would be outdoors. Do I understand what they're saying? Absolutely, I do. But the perception has changed for these animals, and now this institution is trying to figure out what's the next best solution. Do we get rid of them? Do we send them to another institution? Do we build a new exhibit so that they can be outside sometimes, even though that may or may not be for their benefit, because they may still not get tons of time outdoors just because we've got to control the temperature, the water, all of these parameters for their health and well-being. They're challenging. And so this is it just makes animal care so much more difficult, because not only are we trying to do what's best for the animals, which is our primary goal, right? We want happy, healthy animals that live long, long lives because it's what's best for them. And as long as they're with us, we're going to treat them as best we can to make sure they have everything that they need. That is our main goal, But then on top of that, we have to manage how that's looking to the public. So even though an animal may have everything that it needs in its enclosure, in human care, doing its natural behaviors, if that looks weird, if it looks like the exhibit's kind of broken down, or if it looks like the animal is experiencing something unusual, people pick up on that, and they will write about it. They'll tweet about it. They'll make a video about it. Their outrage over what they perceive as happening, even though they don't really know that animal very well and they don't know that individual for sure. There's perception there that we have to take into account when we're making decisions about our exhibits. But dealing with that perception and understanding why people feel the way that they do and their viewpoint of it does help to improve what's happening. Back in the day, you used to see a big cat or an elephant in a cement room, right? A very barren situation where the animal is very exposed and it's not very naturalistic. They don't necessarily have a lot of opportunity to do what they would naturally do, because people wanted to see them. They wanted to kind of gawk at them, right? So they were just in a plain room and you saw the animal and then you moved on with your life. The perception of that is much different now. People realize that these animals have natural behaviors and they should be given the opportunity to exercise them, right? So they should be able to forage. They should be able to wander around. They should be able to climb stuff if that's what they normally do. They should be able to explore their enclosure and try to figure things out, solve puzzles, keep their mind active, keep their limbs and body active, all of that stuff, right? So that's why the zoo and aquarium field responded, A, because it's best for the animal, B, because the perception is important. That's why we design naturalistic exhibits now and make you feel kind of immersed in it, because it's best for the animal, because they can do all those natural behaviors, and we kind of disguise the guests from them where we can. So they feel comfortable enough to do all those normal things that they would do if they were out living in their natural habitat. They can do that in the exhibit where they are, and people can still see them. So we're trying to balance the naturalistic appearance with the ability to see the animal. Because we do want you to be able to see them, but we also want the animal to be comfortable and doing those natural behaviors so that you can see them. You can still see them while they're doing them, right? So that's why exhibit design is way different than it used to be. Public perception is important. It's a big piece of this. because we could go entirely naturalistic and give these animals all of the room that we want to give them as zoos and aquariums, but you'll never be able to see them. They'll be off in a corner, far flung away from the viewing area, and then guests would get annoyed because they can't see the animal that they came to see, right? And that is a difficult balance to have. We would love to give them all the room in the world, but there's always going to be people who complain that they never see the animal when they come by. And so we try to now make it so that the animal feels comfortable no matter where it is. And especially if we can kind of guide them to do certain behaviors in certain areas that are a little closer to the viewing area, or encourage them to kind of linger in that area where guests can see them doing their thing, that is more desirable. So we're not putting them in a barren cement room anymore because that's not appropriate and the perception is terrible. And we're also not giving them the entire forest to run, or entire ocean to swim through, because you'd never be able to see them, and therefore nobody would learn anything about the animals to begin with, right? They wouldn't even see them, so what's the point? Now, not to get into really challenging topics here, but when it comes to elephants and cetaceans, so dolphins, whales, these animals are a little more difficult. This is a bigger challenge, right? We all know that these animals move vast different distances in their day-to-day lives, right? They migrate, they move, and that we in zoos and aquariums may not be able to do all that we can. We can't give them all the room in the world for that kind of activity. We just don't have it as much as we would like to. And so you're seeing a lot more of these types of animals moving towards sanctuaries where they can kind of be in a more natural environment. They're still kind of managed and taken care of. They still have like healthcare and things, but it's a little different than being in a zoo or aquarium. They're not expected to be in any certain area. They're not quite interacted with in the same way that they would be in a zoo or aquarium. And so they're allowed to be a little bit more free, a little bit more unmanaged, and they're invited to kind of manage themselves a little bit more. Now, obviously, if there's a medical issue, they're going to step in and manage that as best they can. But there's a reason that these animals are going that route, right? It's moving more towards acceptable to being in a sanctuary, less acceptable to being in a zoo or aquarium. I'm not going to comment on what I think about that. I'm not an expert on any of them, really. So it's not my say. And I don't fault any institutions who move their animals out. I don't fault any institutions who decide to keep them. It is a personal, institutional decision, and just know that there's a lot more perception to manage if you're going to keep them. Honestly, there's a lot of perception to manage if you send them away to a sanctuary as well. This is like a no-win situation. So just understand that perception does shape animal care. Animal care also does try to manage perception where we can, just to make sure that everybody's kind of understanding and more or less happy with what's going on. And even if what changes we can make to adjust the perception of our guests, even if that's temporary, we're still always trying to move in the best interest of the animal. And sometimes that means that people are going to be mad because they don't understand that animal and that we're going to keep doing what we're doing or continue in a different direction than they think we should because we know those animals best, or we have looked at the research, or, whatever. There are times when the perception is overridden and we choose to educate in that case instead, right? So if anybody is upset about an animal's environment that they're living in that's managed by a zoo or aquarium, and the zoo or aquarium has not opted to alter that environment at all, they're going to give a lot of information about it instead. So going back to, I guess, sea turtles, there are times when you see a sea turtle that looks weird, right? It looks like it's having a problem. It looks like it needs to be looked at, right? That's usually because the sea turtles managed in U.S. zoos and aquariums are kind of regulated by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, right? And they are with us because they have some sort of issue that makes them non-releasable. So that may be visible, that may not be visible. A lot of times when I see it, it's because an animal has a buoyancy problem. So they can't kind of regulate like a normal turtle would in the water, and they look funny while they're swimming. So it might be like a head down kind of position. It might be that they can't really get down. They might have a weight strapped to their back or something like that. It looks different to guests. What we choose to do, because we can't fix that, or else we would have. Sometimes animals just get like hit by a boat and they don't heal quite right, and they now have positive buoyancy and they don't swim normally, right? And so rather than putting them back out in the ocean where they could get hit by a boat again, which is what would happen, then we choose to keep them with us and just try to take care of their needs as best we can while educating really hard about this subject. So you might see a sign that says, this is how I normally swim. It's okay because XYZ. You know, we explain the situation. We give the turtle's backstory so that people walk away understanding this animal a little bit better and understanding that we're doing the very best that we can for their care. Managing perception is probably best done ahead of time. So understanding that people have opinions about things and have viewpoints about stuff, and you just getting out there, being professional, being transparent about what's happening, going ahead and getting that education out there is a much better way of managing perception than waiting for somebody to film something that you don't really love because it's not putting you, your organization, your staff in the best light, and then having to react to that, because that is crisis management at that point rather than perception management. So just understand that if you have any of those situations in your business, whatever it might be, especially if it's in a zoo or aquarium, just understand that getting ahead of it is probably for the best, so you can manage what people are kind of perceiving about what's going on. Go ahead and tell them. Like, be transparent about it. Let them understand and read about it and talk to somebody about it so that they can air their grievances and get an education in return, so that they don't feel like their complaints were ignored, or that somebody needs to be canceled, or that we're doing something wrong. Because one zoo or aquarium that missteps and is doing the wrong thing and not taking care of animals well reflects on all of us. We all know that. So trying to get ahead of it and being proactive and approaching it with education first really, really helps in managing perceptions about our organizations. Also, be proactive and really look at things with a critical eye when you're about to post them to social media. Like I said, we ended up having to go reactive for the director's photos of the turtles piling on top of each other. It was a cute photo. It still is. But the perception had we recognized that it kind of looked like, we would have framed that photo differently so that you could see the entire enclosure behind them rather than zoomed in close cropped on their faces and the fact that they were piled on top of each other, right? So that is what also needs to happen. You need to kind of look at things with a critical eye and understand how the many different ways that photo or that video can be read by the public, because it will be. And rest assured that it's not going to be perfect at any point. There are going to be some missteps that happen, and we have to be okay with that. The important part is to talk about it, understand what went right, what went wrong, how we would change things in the future, and just learn from the mistakes that do happen. So we learned from that issue with the turtle photo, like, okay, we really got to look at these pictures. Like, don't post them without them being perused by multiple eyeballs, so that we can really get an idea of how this looks to multiple different types of people. And that's all it took, was just one misstep and the photos having to be vetted from then on out. It's not like a huge step, but it is a helpful step because now we're not caught off guard. Now we can manage that perception before it gets out there for other people to take over. There's ways that we can deal with it so that it is not a problem, or at least not an insurmountable problem that shuts our organization down and reflects poorly on other organizations. That's what we would like to avoid, and that's why perception management for an organization is important. If you have any questions about that or any other zoo or aquarium things or leadership and management stuff, you can write it up in an email and send it to me at aquatazoo@gmail.com. If you're enjoying the show, and I hope that you do, don't forget you can follow or subscribe on your podcast player of choice. That way you'll get all of that sweet, sweet content as soon as it releases. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can find me on patreon.com/aquatazoo. Okay, thanks for listening. I heart your faces. Okay, bye.